What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week on YouTube. There is only one place to start, and that is with what happened in the Liverpool-Tottenham game. Tottenham end up with the 2-1 victory, but of course the big story here is the disastrous VAR situation involving the Luis Diaz disallowed goal that somehow it looked clear as day that he was onside from the naked eye. Of course, sometimes those angles can be deceiving. So I was sitting there thinking, I'd love to see the lines on this to explain how this is offside. Of course, we never saw the lines. And it turns out that it was just a horrific miscommunication and that the VAR there in England had thought the original call was onside, so he approved it, said check over, and nobody seemed to figure out what was happening, and so this goal, PGMOL called it a significant human error. And that was after the Curtis Jones red card. I don't have too much on this game itself. I want to focus on these 2 points and a bigger point about VAR. Because there's also nothing to say about this Luis Diaz goal. It's an awful mistake, inexcusable. It's just baffling that we're at this position and that somehow it's possible for these kind of things to happen in the Premier League with this far into the world of VAR. But here's the bigger point I want to get at. I've mentioned this before, but specifically these two situations reinforce my belief that the best way to do this that will benefit everybody is to actually start using the words clear and obvious. Because we throw them around and pretend like that's what we're talking about, but it's not. Because every conversation is, did they get the call right? Do you agree with the call with the decision VAR made? Did VAR get it right or wrong? That is not the question that is supposed to be asked. The question is, was there a clear and obvious mistake that needs to be fixed? Will the referee regret not being able to get a second look at that and change their mind? But we don't behave that way, collectively, in the conversation around VAR and in the way VAR is used. At least in my opinion. And so, again, there is no excuse for what happened on the Luis Diaz goal. But one of the things I've been thinking about is, I wonder if that would have gone differently if the question from the very beginning with VAR is, was the call on the field a clear and obvious error? What was the call on the field? Was it clearly wrong? Because then you're thinking in terms of the call on the field, which is where the miscommunication happened, is that Darren England thought the call was onside rather than offside. Again, no excuse, but it's easier for me to understand how that happens when you're focused on the onside versus offside as opposed to taking the call and evaluating the call to see if it's a clear and obvious error. Which brings me to the Curtis Jones red card, because those were really the 2 points that decided this game. And Cody Gakpo gets the goal, and then Liverpool look like they're going to hold on 11v9, and you get the Matip own goal at the very last second. Spurs come away with another dramatic win. That, based on the balance of play and the way things went, they didn't deserve. Just because of the amount of things Liverpool had go against them, which I'll get to at the end here. That Curtis Jones red card. The Diogo Jota one, I have very little sympathy. That was 2 yellow card challenges. Maybe he's a little unlucky, but when you're on a yellow, you got to be smarter than that. Curtis Jones, I don't know what he's supposed to do. He's on top of the ball, his foot slides off, and if you take the freeze frame of him making contact, yeah, it looks awful, and yeah, it looks like violent conduct, and yeah, it looks like a red. But I wholeheartedly agree with the analysis you heard while they were talking about this on the broadcast, which is that's completely taking out the context of the fact that you're playing the sport. And it's a contact sport and things happen sometimes. And so, once again, to look at that when it was originally a yellow and sit there and say that was a clear and obvious mistake and it was violent conduct, to me, is just flat out wrong. If it was a red originally, I would not have a major issue keeping the red. But again, we're not talking about was it enough of a mistake that it had to be fixed. We're saying was it a red or not. It's the wrong conversation, but it's the way VAR operates. And so I just came away from this game thinking about that. And I'm going to keep harping on it because to me that's the easiest way to make this work better for everybody. Because the referees are looking bad, teams are frustrated. The Premier League just has not been able to figure this out yet. And to me, the best solution is use it like instant replay in the NFL. You have to have, or, reviewing basketball, indisputable video evidence. That's the phrase that those sports tend to use. Where you see things, and all the time you'll see people say, it's hard to tell, I just don't think there's enough to overturn that call. We don't really use that language and talk that way when it comes to VAR. I hope that changes because to me that's the only way this is going to get significantly better. I also am somebody who does not like to really go after referees, to quote unquote blame games on referees. I'm a firm believer that you're going to have some games where you are on the wrong end of some calls, some other ones like this example for Spurs where things go your way even though you didn't necessarily do anything to earn it, and it all balances out over a 38 game season. That being said, this is probably the most egregious combination of refereeing mistakes that have influenced the outcome of a game I can think of in the VAR era. Which again isn't saying all that much because my bar for referees impacting games is incredibly high. One call doesn't really get much of a reaction from me. But the fact that you flat out missed the goal for reasons beyond comprehension and had the Curtis Jones red card before that, which was already forcing Liverpool to play a man down, that I also vehemently disagree with that one. I know I'm not alone in that, but there are also people who think it's a red. That one, again, I am sure Jurgen Klopp would have complained about it anyway. If that was the only thing, I wouldn't really have brought it up all that much other than to maybe make a point about it. But you combine those two things and the fact that they still came that close to getting a point, and the fact that they would have been 2-1 up even with the red card had the Luis Diaz goal counted like it should have. And I just feel like I can't remember a team that I believe was so unlucky in terms of the impact refereeing decisions had on a game. Now, the other part of this, looking at the Premier League as a whole this weekend, which is the other thing I want to get into here, even with that loss, as unlucky as Liverpool were, right back in the title race because Manchester City lost to Wolves, and Spurs and Arsenal right there as well. And Arsenal in particular and Liverpool, to me, are the two. And I've been talking about this. They had to keep pace and stay within striking distance until City dropped points. Otherwise, this could have gotten really boring really quickly. And what do you know? They kept finding ways. City dropped all 3 points against Wolves after getting knocked out of the Carabao Cup, so you know, no quadruple. And now, Arsenal, Liverpool, right there. Still behind City, but within that 3-point margin where one draw changes things, you're right there. So now this season has a different feel to it. We're a long way from actually having a title race because now you got to keep pace with Manchester City for 4 or 5 more months before we get to the business end of this, right? But it's much more probable that we're going to have something interesting by the time we get to, the holiday fixtures and things like that. That maybe we can be hopeful again that we actually are going to get a title race. Because I was worried there. If we didn't get one last season after Manchester City started so poorly, you give them a 5-6 point cushion. I don't think anybody's catching them. But now we're almost back to square one. And so it also gives next week's game at the Emirates, Arsenal Manchester City, a different feel. Because had City beat Wolves, in my mind, that's a must win for Arsenal and a must win for the title race. If City go in there and don't lose any points on Arsenal, good luck trying to catch them. But now it's an opportunity for Arsenal to, depending on how everything goes, maybe go to the top of the table, maybe pass Manchester City, at least even with a draw, stay close to Manchester City, give Liverpool an opportunity. It feels much more like a top of the table clash now than it does a team trying to cling on to hope of maybe staying in the title race. I know that's dramatic for late September, early October, but that's the kind of pressure Manchester City puts on everybody. And this loss to Wolves, kind of coming out of nowhere, changes that complexion. To me, the season has a very different feel now. We'll see how long this lasts. I'm not here to say that all of a sudden now we have a title race that's going to go down to the final day of the season, but we're an awful lot closer to that than we were 7 days ago. Last thing I want to recognize here before I get out, congratulations, FC Cincinnati Supporters Shield winners. 3 games to spare, awfully impressive, far and away the best team in Major League Soccer. And I want to give Cincinnati credit in particular for the way that this all played out. Everybody got excited at the end of last season. Matt Miazga comes. They're showing improvement. They make the playoffs. You feel like another off season. They're right there, one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Many people, including myself, thought maybe they can be a factor in the Supporters' Shield race. Clearly one of the best teams in the league heading into this season. They did not just meet those expectations, which would have been an incredible accomplishment considering this team has made the postseason, once and been relevant in the Major League Soccer landscape once. They didn't just look like one of the best teams in the league. They were hands down the best team in the league this season. And a lot of that has to do with exactly what the argument was as to why they could get so much improvement so quickly. They went from conceding 1.7-ish goals a game to 1.13. Because you got these couple off-season or mid-season additions last year, headlined by Matt Miazga. You get him in the preseason, you get a full season of him. You sell Brenner, doesn't really matter. You're still getting enough production up front. Lucho Costa's been phenomenal, of course, on his way to probably winning league MVP. I don't think we're talking enough about that part of this. This is the first time they've ever had expectations placed on them. And they were significant expectations. They didn't just meet them. They blew the doors off those expectations. Comprehensively the best team in the league from start to finish, had that historic start, stumbled a little bit here and there, but that's also just natural in this league. It's not like anybody ever tested them. It looked like for a moment somebody might, and then they kept finding ways to get points, and nobody else put a run together. And so now they get to just set themselves up for the postseason here, these last few games of the season, already knowing they've got a trophy. And that's, again, why the Supporters' Shield is so important, because who knows what happens next. They were, had an opportunity in the Open Cup, had an opportunity in Leagues Cup, didn't come away with anything. And the Open Cup was there for the taking. And then Messi came and kind of messed the whole thing up. But they have this tangible proof of how good they were this season. That's why I'm a big believer in the Supporters' Shield. They deserve a trophy, and now they have one. And moving into the postseason, I'll talk more about this as we get closer in decision day and we get playoff matchups and all that. And I will go through and probably do the same test I did last season about the certain metrics you have to hit to be an MLS Cup contender. Because the numbers last season did not lie. There were 2 teams. Those 2 teams made MLS Cup. Cincinnati did not fit into that category because of how bad they were defensively. And maybe you can say, you shouldn't have factored it in until Miazga got there. Potentially that's fair, but even still, they were not what they are now. This is a very good defensive team. You don't have to be the best defensive team in the league, but you have to be a very good defensive team. That's what they are, and a dynamic attacking team. And of course, they can score goals. I look at this team and I see a formula that allows you to survive the postseason. Because there are going to be games where you give up weird goals or things just go wrong and you have to go win 3-2. And there are going to be games where you got to win 1-0. There are going to be games where you got to be able to dominate the ball and break teams down, especially when they're coming into this stadium. There are going to be a lot of teams trying to bunker down and just keep the game close. Give them yourselves a chance, go to a shootout, whatever it might be. Got to be able to break them down. Cincinnati can do that. And you're going to have to be able to play in transition. You're going to have to be able to deal with chaos. Multi-dimensional teams are everything when it comes to knockout tournaments. And that is what Cincinnati has finally built. They're an excellent attacking team and a very good defensive one. There is no clear hole here. That's a formula for success in the MLS postseason. We'll see if it happens. It doesn't guarantee anything. But of the list of teams that I actually think can win MLS Cup, Cincinnati is going to be on that list. Not every number one seed is. I will tell you that right now. Because they don't have this kind of balance and this kind of dynamism. So congratulations, FC Cincinnati. Terrific story, terrific team. We'll see where things go from here. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.